Welcome to the Wisdom Seat podcast. I'm Bill Moriarty. Today's guest is Michele Martin, Buddhist practitioner, translator, and author. She spent more than 30 years studying with Tibetan Lamas in Nepal and India, and is the author and translator of Music in the Sky, the life, art, and teachings of the 17th Karmapa. This interview was conducted in person by Joanna Rotté before a live audience at Sky Lake Shambhala Meditation Retreat Center in Rosendale, New York. Here's Joanna and Michele.
I'm very happy and honored to have Michele Martin with us tonight. By way of a little intro, Michele is a practitioner, a scholar, a teacher, a student of great Lamas, and a translator. And she is that rare kind of translator that does both texts and oral translation, so written and simultaneous. So we are very pleased to welcome her tonight. Thank you, Michele, for being with us. Your background was typically American in some ways, and yet you've spent time living in Nepal and traveling in India and Nepal, time in Japan, and you've become over the years a great practitioner and Tibetan Buddhist and scholar. So how did that happen? You want to tell us, where did it start? What drew you to the Dharma?
Yeah.
How did it begin?
Well, that's kind of difficult. You get into kind of infinite regress when you go back to maybe that started or that started that. But I think one of the major events was that when I was in 8th grade, so my parents were going on this trip to India, trip around the world, and they were going to park me with a cousin, for 3 months. And I said, I want to go with you. I want to stay at home. So to their great merit and kindness, they took me along with them. So I had grown up in the Midwest, north of Chicago, small town, had never seen the likes of poverty or that you see when you're in India and so forth. So we kind of hop-skipped through Europe and wound up in Delhi in India for 3-4 weeks. And this was just, I don't know, I felt we were on a DC, here I am, DC-3, and the stairs kind of go down like this from the side of the plane. And I remember walking down the stairs and just feeling at home. Somehow the smell, the light, everything was just home space. It was really strange. So we traveled all over India, and I just wanted to do nothing but come back. I was just totally enchanted. And it also left a question with me when I was there. We were traveling in what was the equivalent of a stretch limousine. That was a big car, and it had jump seats. And I was sitting in the jump seat, and we were traveling through Old Delhi, where the streets were very narrow, and it was hot. And so I had rolled down the window, and this leper who was sitting on the street beside the car, we were in a traffic jam and we couldn't move. He jumped up and he put his hand through the window, and that landed right in front of my face. I could see, his hand was deformed and things, and it put this question into my mind of why am I sitting here in the car, safe? I was wearing white gloves of all things, and nice dress, and he's sitting out there living on the sidewalk. Why? Why is that? And that is kind of a question that stayed with me for a long time. So that when I think the explorations that I was making of philosophy and practice and everything, were looking for an answer to that. Oh, and the other thing that happened was someone taught me, I can't remember where it was, it was in Thailand, some basic mudras, like peace over the waters. This is their interpretation, but everything, peace over the waters and meditation, so on. When I came back and people asked me, well, what did you learn? I went through these mudras, So not really knowing what I was doing. So there was some kind of connection that was settled there. And we also went to Sarnath, so to the deer park. So there were some seeds that were laid on that.
How did your parents feel about your appreciation of and response to the East and that culture?
I think they were ambivalent because, on the one hand, they could kind of delight in my seeing all these new things and so forth. And I think having a young woman along with them opened up connections to other people as well. You know, they get something to talk about right away. But also, I kept wanting to go back. You know, I had these plans. Okay, I'll go to Stanford and learn Hindi, and I'll go to East-West Institute, and then I'll go to Shanti-Niketan, which Rabindranath Tagore started, and I'll study there. And my parents didn't really want that. They wanted me to live a traditional life in the States. So it was kind of an ambivalent.
And then when did you have your first encounter with meditation as a technique? And to do as a practice?
When I was a graduate student at Yale, we were the city commune, and then there was another group that had a commune out in the country. And two of those people there were initiators for the meditation. So I started with this very secret mantra that I found out everybody had.
The same mantra.
The same mantra, yes.
Do you remember it?
Yes, it was Om.
Very secret mantra. That's why nobody told each other.
Yeah, and it was useful. I mean, I was having to go I was in New Haven. I had to go to the city to do research, and the mantra was kind of restorative. You know, it would relax me and things. But there was something. It didn't take me any deeper. You know, I wanted to know more about how the mind worked and what was going on. And that didn't do that.
Yeah, so you found your way to Yale, but there was Russian studies and comparative literature.
Yeah.
So from there, after that, when did you find Tibet? And first there was Zen.
First
yes?
there was Zen, yeah.
With many of us, first there is Zen. And that was actually in Japan.
Well, it was in the U.S., but I guess, you know, that was a great time to be in New Haven because it was late 60s, early 70s, and we had, you know, street protests against the war and things. And Yale was very open at that time. Like, in the free school, there was a world-famous Dante scholar who was teaching the Tarot. That was his hidden interest. So it was a very open time. Yeah. And we had...
But, excuse me, at this point, you're still not a meditation practitioner.
I'm oming.
You're oming.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so then we had someone at Yale who brought people in from Esalen Institute to do Rolfing, group therapy.
Consciousness raising.
Consciousness raising, yes, exactly. So I thought, okay, I'll finish my doctoral orals and I'll go write my dissertation in California, where everything's happening, you know. So I drove cross country. I wound up in California at Esalen Institute, which was kind of a hotbed of, you know, the Asian studies and all kinds of things. And I had a relationship that tanked. And then I thought, oh, you know, what do I do now? Where do I go? And Tassajara was just up the road. And I had read a lot of D.T. Suzuki, so I thought, okay, now it's time to practice. So I went to do a sesshin there, and that really led me into Zen.
Wow, you started with a sesshin.
Yes.
Sesshin is a week-long practice of pretty much nothing but sitting. Sitting practice. Yeah. Bravo. So from there you went to Japan.
Then I went, so I was driving cross country and I stopped in New Mexico. I was on Route 66. I stopped in New Mexico and my grandparents had some land there. I felt a connection. And, you know, it's called the Land of Enchantment. And I started driving through New Mexico and I couldn't leave. I spent a month there and I said, I'm not going to spend all this time in California coming back here. So I eventually did, and started a Zen center there, stayed there for 4 years, and then I moved to Japan to learn Japanese, and that's where I met Tibetan Buddhism, actually. In
Yeah.
Kyoto, yes.
Yeah. So do you consider that some people have a facility for language? And was there a language, a non-English language that you learned before Japanese?
Yeah.
Was that your first one?
No, I learned French and German and Russian before that.
So for your master's at Yale or your doctorate at Yale, that was, you
Those three languages.
you were reading Russian.
Yeah.
Amazing. Was that in your family, that gift, talent, skill?
My mother was interested in languages, but she didn't. She spoke a little bits of this and that, you know.
So you learned Japanese in Japan, and then you were introduced to Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes.
So please tell us about that.
So, I moved to Japan and I was living inside. There are these two traditions, Soto and Rinzai Zen. So I was living inside the Rinzai Zen headquarters. There were like 46 different temples, and I was living in one of them. And somehow I felt I did a lot of practice. I did a lot of these sashins, and somehow it wasn't working. For some reason, I felt like my heart wasn't opening up. I felt it was very much up in my head, which is, graduate school illness, I guess. And so I was kind of looking for something else. And at the same time, I had met a professor named Nagao Gajin, who was head of Sanskrit studies at Kyoto University.
Yeah.
And I wound up helping him write articles and edit things. And he was also a great Tibetan scholar. So it's through him that I started reading Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu. And actually he was talking about Norman Fisher, and he's written this book on mind training. Because he said Zen doesn't have mind training. There's no mind training in Zen. So he wrote a commentary on Achucha's mind training.
Yeah.
And so in the book he said he's writing this because Zen talks about compassion, but it doesn't have practices to develop it. And that's sort of what I had felt. You take these vows to, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them all. But there's no practice like Tonglen that really works with your heart to open it up. So that's, I think, when I finally came to the Tonglen practice, that's what really worked for me.
And was that here in the States?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's find out now about your root teacher, your first Tibetan Lama.
Was Dujum Rinpoche.
Dujum.
Mima Lama.
And you met him here in the
And then
States?
in New York City, I was living in Stony Brook, and I was I had sort of said goodbye to Zen, but I hadn't found anything yet. And I saw this advertisement for Dujum Rinpoche's teaching in New York City, and somehow something pulled me, and I went to the teaching, and I made a real strong connection with him. I went back again and again and wound up, taking a lot of teachings from him, cooking at the center, helping with all the things. It was Yeshe Ningpo, which was in New York at 17th Street. So I did that for some years.
And from there, that took you to?
So from there then, let's see. I was going to 3-year retreat in France and I injured my knee, so I couldn't go in. So I came back to the States and I was guiding. He has a retreat center up in Greenville.
Dujum.
Yes. So I stayed there for a long time, working on my emdro in the cold winter, the prostrations. And then Kala Rinpoche did the Kala Chakra in New York in 1982. And I just made a really strong connection with him. They put up a sign for, it said, it's the secret teachings of the Kala Chakra at KTD on this particular day. Like, oh, secret teachings. So we went there for the teachings, and it turned out to be the 4 thoughts that turned to mine. Which he was always teaching, but they were very profound. So I kind of made a connection with KTD then. So I moved into the monastery, and I was working at SUNY Press, and I had a job at SUNY Press.
You moved into KTD Monastery
Yeah.
at that point. Ah.
And I had started working. I needed to make some money, so I thought, what do you do with the graduate degrees in literature? There's not much you could do with them, no. So I started book editing. I worked with Station Hill Press over in Barrytown for the first years. Yeah. And that was great. Everything was there. The whole printing process was happening, like where the Terrapin restaurant now is. That used to be
in Rosendale. Yeah.
In Rosendale, yeah. We used to have our printing presses in that building.
Oh, fantastic.
And then we did all the typesetting in Barrytown. So
And you were copy editing, or you were?
I was editing.
You were editing.
Yeah, I was editing and bringing in manuscripts and things.
And were those manuscripts in English? Or
Yes.
Okay.
We kind of specialized in New York avant-garde poetry, like John Cage and so on.
So when did the Tibet language then come in to your rich life?
I think it started. I had when I was at OCD, the Open Chizong Dujum Rinpoche Center. I started learning how to write, and then slowly there were Tibetan classes there that I went to. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then when I moved to KTD, there was a Bhutanese man there who was teaching Tibetan, and I started working on translating texts that Khenpo Khantar Rinpoche was teaching during the summer. He'd do like 3 months of summer teaching. The first one was Medicine Buddha, and then there was White Tara, and then there was an Amitabha practice. So I worked on translating those during the winter, and then he would teach during the summer. So
Using those texts, using those liturgies.
So I started out doing sadhana practices, basically.
So of the different lamas, Dujum, Kalu, and what you consider Dujum your root guru because he was the first.
Yeah.
And did you take refuge with him?
Yes.
Okay. And how about Bodhisattva?
Yes.
Also with Dujum Rinpoche? Okay. So then, what drew you to want to go to Nepal, or was it India first?
It was Nepal. Well, I did go back to India in '72, but that was more exploratory. I was sort of looking for women teachers. So
Within the Dharma.
Within the Dharma, but it was broad. I mean, I went to see Mahanandamayi.
We all are.
And then I came back to the States. But the Tibetan language came much later, after I'd been to Japan. And when I came back, this was the early '80s, and I was working at SUNY Press, and then I would come back and do these translations. And what happened was that Khenpo Tsogden Gyaltsen came to KTD. This must have been like 1986. I think it was. He was teaching in August, and he was teaching a text called the Sublime Continuum, which is one of the 5 main texts of Maitreya, which is sort of the basis of the Shantung view. He was teaching the root text plus Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche's commentary, and he had come with 3 or 4 of his translators. And I just was blown away by this. I said, this is finally, a view that makes sense to me. Everybody has Buddha nature. We're all on the path to enlightenment. We're just in different phases of it. And, if you do your practice, you can clear away all these adventitious stains, and you're left with this radiant Buddha nature. And it fit all the experience I had, and I kept going later and later to work. And I finally realized that this is what I wanted to do. So I finished up the Buddhist text. I was developing a Buddhist series there, and I finished up the Buddhist text, and then I moved to Nepal. Because Khenpo had started, he was starting an institute for translators there in '87. And so I moved there to study.
Was that in Kathmandu?
Yeah.
So did he have a temple there, or he had a monastery?
No, he never had any set place, except later in life. But he was, what they call a chadrapa, or a kusali, a wandering yogi. We moved from house to house.
You moved with him.
Yes. One time, he had a Bhutanese passport because the Queen of Bhutan had given a lot of the Tibetans when they came out, especially the Kargi Tibetan, passports. So the 16th Karmapa and the Four Heart Sons, they all had Bhutanese passports. But in Nepal, Bhutan is a foreign country, so he only could stay for 3 months. And Kimball realized after, he had 2 days left on his passport, and we were in the middle of a course, and he said, "Bye, I'll see you in Bulgaria." So he decamped to Bulgaria, and we all kind of made our way down there. And then, so that's kind of typical. It was very spontaneous.
So in terms of your translation work, Michele, he was primarily the person who guided you into which text?
Yeah. He actually, the 16th Karmapa had said to him, "Your job is to train Western translators."
Ah.
So he was very capable at that. He was amazing. He wrote 2 texts for the basic things you need to know for grammar and for reasoning and things. And then he guided us through the Maitreya texts and also through how to translate. So we would have a class and he would make you stand up in front of the class. There were people that you knew, so you weren't uptight about it.
How many of there were you at this?
There were about, I'd say 15.
All Americans?
No, they were Europeans, German.
But English speakers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had to stand up.
You had to stand up, because one of the hard things about translating is you're there in this kind of vulnerable state, and you're trying to get all the nuances of what the Lama's saying, and really focus on that. And then 200 people are staring at you. It's kind of you can feel it, So he started us off standing up in front of people doing this, and something that was easy, like the Four Noble Truths or something that you could say it yourself practically, but he was giving you the chance to do that. And then we also had an institute where we taught Tibetan, and we also, he would teach us a text, and he made us turn around and teach it again to someone else, which is, of course, the best way to learn. And so he would come into those classes, and he would just, he'd wander around the house we'd rented, and he would give a short teaching into the position of standing up in front of people and translating.
So that was the oral translation training.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about the written?
The written. Well,
do you know a translator named Douglas Duckworth?
Sure. I worked with him. I worked with him on a book, actually.
So I wanted to slip in a quote that I heard from him on a podcast, a wisdom podcast yesterday. Mm-hmm. And it is that translating text gives the translator the opportunity to read deeply and read slowly. So it made me think that then enables that translator to become a person capable of great depth and capable of slowing down.
Well, I don't know about the great depth, but it does he taught us the way he taught the students at the room text showed us. So you had to memorize the root text, and this was 3-4 line verses in Tibetan that you had to memorize from day to day. So I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning and start memorizing the text, because what happened was he had a box with our names in it with a hole slit in the top, and he'd shake the box and a name would come out, and you had to stand up in front of everybody and recite the root verses. So that was a great impetus to really learn them well, But it was also a wonderful time in that you kind of were sunk into the text. Mm-hmm. And I found I couldn't memorize unless I understood what the text meant. Mm-hmm. So those early morning hours were really a precious time of just spending time with this text and letting it kind of turn over in your mind again and again. Mm-hmm. And I think that translating does have that benefit of really allowing you to
slow down and
look in the text more deeply.
Look in. Let it come out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So of the work that you've done, do you have a favorite of texts that you've translated?
Yeah. I mean, all of them have their. I mean, from the early days, the first text that I ever translated for Kempo was the Dharmatavibhanga, dividing phenomena from their pure nature. It was one of the 5 Maitreya texts. And I really loved that text. It was a beautiful work of literature. It gave a really clear definition of like what wisdom was, and turning around the basis, which is sort of what changing the space that you arise out of. Instead of a conceptual mind, you are arising out of a wisdom mind. So it has a very beautiful description of that. And I think, and it's short, it's not a long text, so I think that was early on my favorite text. And then recently, I've been doing a new translation of Tilopa's Ganges Mahamudra, and that's pretty wonderful. And it's a totally different, this is the Maitreya texts are more sutra texts, they're more Mahayana, Yogacara type of texts, whereas the Tilopa text is an oral, what do you want to call it, a mena. It's a key instruction for coming into the nature of your mind, and it's just a really wonderful text. He doesn't mince his words, he's just very clear and beautiful.
Do you respond more to the poetry or to the language or structure? Or is it all of that?
I think it's all of that. One of the, when I was studying at Yale, one of the literary criticism schools that was very prominent then was called Russian formalism. And basically, to boil it down, it's that structure has meaning, structure informs meaning. And Tibetan is very aware of that. The people that write, the order of things is really important. One thing follows out after the other. And so I think the structure is important.
Because it helps reveal the meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like guideposts, to the meaning. So the structure is really important. But also, the poetic language can be very inspiring. So
Yeah.
it's hard to separate the two out.
Yeah. And are you able to, so the structure is inherent in the Tibetan language, but then you need to find a corollary for that in the English language. This could be tricky.
It's tricky. The Tibetan doesn't rhyme. The Tibetan poetry doesn't rhyme the way English rhymes. It's metered. So there's usually 7 beats, 9 beats, 11 beats to a line. And that makes memorizing it pretty easier as well. It has this pulsive quality. But, so I neither try to repeat the metered.
You don't?
No, because it makes it too sing-songy in English. It sounds like a sewing machine or something. And the rhyme, of course, you can't really do that either. And I focus on meaning translations. I think that's the important thing, is that what people want out of it is meaning. So it's free verse, it's clear. I try to make the meaning clearer and put it in. You can use assonance, you can use, repeated vowel sounds and things to kind of give it a sense of being a more elevated kind of language. You can do that without making it seem too artificial, I think. So that's what I've tried to do.
How would you characterize the skills, the difference in skills for oral translating and text translating, since you do both?
Well, for one thing, for oral translating, you have to respond right away. There's no time to reflect. You just, the Lama says something and it has to come out. So that's one thing. Whereas with written translating, you really have a chance to mull things over, to try out different things, let them sit for a day, go back to it. Does it feel right? Does it not feel right? And I'd sort of appreciate being able to do that ahead of time, to get a translation that's workable before I go on the road with the text. So, and then I think in Thupten Jimbo, the Dalai Lama's translator, he was speaking at a translators conference once, and he said, people asked him how his English is really wonderfully articulate, And he said what he did was he read all different kinds of literature. He read, the newspaper, he read poetry, he read life stories, he read philosophy, so that he And that's what he recommended that we do for learning the written. So it helps. I think the comparative literature background that I had was helpful in being able to do written translation.
Well, it's very nice to know that Yale came and was impactful. Yeah, came back around. So I really don't want to ignore the reality of our world that we live in right now. And we have an administration in this country that is unfriendly to other countries and even creating harmful activity and unkindness and using harsh language. And you have spent a lot of time in a very different kind of country, poor country in Nepal, and many, many poor people also in India. So Michele, since the kind of turn in American politics, what have you observed in Nepal and among the people of Nepal that is either as a direct response of what's happening in America or their concerns about it? How is this impacting?
Well, I think the main thing for a lot of poor countries, and Nepal is as poor as any of the poorest African countries, and the USAID grants that were canceled was very hard. It was on the front page of the leading Nepali English newspaper, and that the withdrawal of that support, I think, is really difficult. But I also, coming back to the States, you read 60% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's close to poverty, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really, and I think when you engage in political activity with the motivation being the compassion for people, then I think you don't get caught in the anger that can really burn you out.
I agree.
So I think with that motivation, that it's really important for people to stand up and make themselves heard. We were both in Kingston, protests on Saturday.
Yeah.
There were 1,000 people there.
There were so many people
Yeah.
and umbrellas.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
So if you could speak to the U.S. State Department, or if you could speak to the American people in general, what would you like us to know about Nepalese people and Tibetan Buddhism in Nepal that would be of benefit for us now?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that when I went to Nepal, I went there to study Tibetan, to learn Tibetan. So my knowledge of Nepal is mainly the Tibetans who are in Nepal. And they, in '59, when they had to escape over the Himalayas, there was a large number of them that stayed in Nepal. Others went on to India. That there's a large Tibetan community there that supports, like Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche's monastery, for example, and Dudjom Rinpoche has a monastery there. The thing that always strikes me about Nepal is that it's so a little amount of money can make such a great difference there. So we may think, okay, it's $1 million in aid that's lost. Well, but it really means a lot. Even if you're like supporting students, like I support two students through school. Trungpa Rinpoche has a school in Bodha, and that changes their lives. And they become nurses. They become teachers. They lift the country up. So, and they don't have much themselves. Most of the school kids are sponsored. They come in from the mountain region where nobody wants to go because they're all bored being way out in the mountains with nothing to do. Nobody wants to go there. So the schools are not very good there if there are any at all. So they're brought down into Kathmandu, and there are about 800 students now in Trungpa Rinpoche's school.
So we have time for a couple questions. If you have something you'd like to ask Michele.
Michele, you had this amazing opportunity to spend so much time with great teachers. And it's like incredible.
Yeah.
And I would just love to hear some stories. Maybe you could tell us, one, bring to life somebody here.
Well, there's one that sort of ties into Children Rinpoche. No, to Karma Children. So maybe I could talk about that a little bit. It has to do with Kempo children. And once I was on a retreat, not too far from where we were temporarily housed in Marker Institute for translators, and I was doing a retreat in my apartment, and I had this like really burning question, like, is this what I'm experiencing? Is this the nature of mind, or is it not? What is it? And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go see Kempo. I'm gonna ask him, and I knew that if it was a stupid question, I'd get my head taken off. He just sort of looked to the side, and I felt this huge wave of energy come over me that completely filled me. It was totally non-conceptual, and I just sat there in that energy. And he said, "What are you experiencing?" And I couldn't say anything. I went through all the vocabulary that I learned as a translator. Nothing fit, And so I just sat there, and he said, "Tell me, what is it you're experiencing?" And I thought, "Oh God, I have to say something. What can I say?" And I said, "Well, it's an experientiable something." That was all I could come up with. And he didn't say anything, but I kind of looked up at him a little bit, and he had this sort of slight smile on his face. And that was all. So that stayed with me, the practice, and it would kind of come and go, the experience. And then we were at Karma Chuling, where he taught in the summers for 3-4 weeks in August. And there was kind of a group of old students that gathered then. It was sort of like a family gathering. It was really great. And so he was teaching the Mahamudra text by the ninth Karmapa, the Ocean of Certainty. And so part of that was pointing out instructions. So as usual, there were 4 translators, and we would go one by one. So it was good. You had time to do translate your section of the text. And so also for pointing out instructions, we were going one by one. And as the first person came through the door and did their bows, I felt that same energy coming up again. And I said, "Oh, that's what pointing out instruction is." So that was the way he taught, It's really special.
You mentioned to me that you attended Trungpa Rinpoche's cremation.
Yes.
Maybe you would tell us that story.
Well, there's not much to say about it. I mean, I felt his presence very strongly in the States before I ever left. And I thought, well, should I go? Is there any reason to go? And then I thought, yes, I need to turn up. I need to be there, be present. So I went over, and it's hard to put into words, but it's just like he was totally present there and that was not my only experience. It was what other people felt as well. That it's somehow almost when they're not in their bodies, their presence is stronger than when they're in their bodies.
Patrice?
When you were speaking about being a group of maybe 12 or 15 translators with Kempo in Nepal, and I'm curious what your experience has been throughout a sort of a different angle, but as being a woman, how many women or females were in that group of 12 to 15? And did you go through periods where you felt something distinct about being a woman translator or a woman practitioner in that culture, or with the teachers, or just what your experience as a woman?
Well, the Tibetan culture is a macho culture. I mean, there's no naysaying that, you know. So you're dealing with that, even though you have people like Dewangma Pamo and Machik Labrin and Yeshe Sogyal and so forth, but they're the exception rather than the rule. And I relied on those role models to kind of back me up. That was kind of my support during all of this. And there were in Nepal. There was a French woman, and there was a German woman, and the Greek woman who were there, working in translations.
So 4 women
Yeah.
out of 12?
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah. Well, Kempo was the place where you went if you wanted to study text, because in those days we weren't allowed to go to the shedra. The shedras were closed for women. That happened a lot later.
Whoa.
So,
What allowed it to open?
I think, I really don't know. I think part of it was that there were a lot of us who were studying and obviously, interested in studying and translating text. So that I think helped.
What about nuns like Tenzin Palmo and Pema? Did that have an influence, you think?
Yeah, I think it did.
Because they wanted to study.
Yeah. But Tenzin Palmo was more doing practice.
At
She
that
wasn't
time.
studying text.
Yeah.
And if you wanted, I had this, it's sort of like a, what do you call it, a professional hazard, and that I'm interested in sort of conceptual things. So, kind of the graduate student kind of morphed into studying philosophy and things. So that was different from what they did. They were more practice focused, although we practiced a lot. I mean, Kimball had us doing retreats. He didn't encourage 3 retreats, but we did month-long retreats. He'd send us up into the mountains to the caves to practice for weeks and things on our own. So, and then like when we did this Marpa Institute, when he had to go down to Bodh Gaya, escape, so we all followed after him, and it was wonderful. We were staying at the Burmese Vihar, and we'd go down to the stupa every morning and do 37 practices together. And then at night you could go over the back wall. There were no policemen around. Go to the back wall and sit wherever you wanted. So he encouraged a lot of practice. It wasn't just the intellectual side, but he trained us the way he trained the monks in Rimtak. He gave us the same kind of instruction.
For meditation instruction and sadhana?
For text study.
Textual study. I see. I think one more. Min. Yes, please.
Yeah, so
Yes,
I want
okay.
to know some of your feelings when you have read this book. I'm very interested to know how it beginning and how you started to read this one.
So the title of the book, this is the one on the 17th Karmapa?
Yes.
Okay. The title is?
Music in the Sky.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. And that you translated.
Yeah, and it started from when the Karmapa escaped in 2000. He was in Dharamsala, and there was a call that went out to all the Kargyu teachers that they should come to Dharamsala to have a meeting. So Tonga Rinpoche was in Nepal. I was in Nepal, and there was also what was his name? His name was Sanjay. I think it was Sanjay Rinpoche. He was there from Tibet. So I was kind of crossing the border into India was sometimes dicey because the border guards wanted money when there were Tibetans in the car. In order to let them into India, you had to bribe them on your way in. And so I think Trungpa Rinpoche figured if he had an American with him, it would be easier. So I arranged for a car that took us from Kathmandu through the border, where I had to do a little bit of slipping along of rupees, And then we made it into to Dharamsala. And there at the Nobulinka Institute, which is just outside of Dharamsala, they have a beautiful shrine hall, and that's where all the lamas were meeting with the young Karmapa. And so at the end of the meeting, they were invited up to Dharamsala to where the Tibetan opera group performs, a big theater, and they sang a song that the Karmapa had written on his escape route out of Tibet. And it was so beautiful, and I said, I really want to translate this. So then that started, and I started translating that. And then one of the monks said, well, you know, there are more songs. I had them in my computer. Oh, really? So then that started those. And then while I was at Gyuto, when I was actually attending Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings, there were people from the Karmap's administration that asked me to come to Gyuto to help out. So that's how I got to Gyuto. And then when I was there, I realized that all the people who had planned his escape were there. They had just come into India with him, and the stories were fresh, and they all did it from different angles. So I went around with my tape recorder asking them questions like, what did you do, and how did you do it, and how did you disguise what it was? And so then I put that all together, and that was kind of the introduction part. And then the Karmapa's sister was there, and she had tons of stories about him growing up. So then I interviewed her and got those stories, and that kind of filled in the childhood, and so it kind of organically.
That was a very
like that.
different kind of project for you, to do the oral interviews and then integrate that.
Yeah, it was more journalism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful.
it was a timely book.
Thank you.
That was Michele Martin speaking with Joanna Rotté at Sky Lake Shambhala Meditation Retreat Center in Rosendale, New York. That conversation was recorded in April 2025. Thanks to Joanna for conducting the interview, to Steve Gorn for providing audio equipment and assistance, and Alex Simmons for audio editing. Come check us out at thewisdomseat.org.